Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. Today we're going to get ready to attach the body of the bubble to the bodice of the bubble. Now what we have to do first is we have to sew some gathering threads along the top of the body. So I'm still got my machine set to a straight stitch, but I need to increase my stitch length to a basting width, which on my machine is a 4.0. Okay, now I want to remember that the left side of the back of my bubble is where I want to have the placket folded inside. So I'm going to put a pin there just to remind myself. Okay, so I'm going to start by sewing my first basting thread about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the body. And then I'll sew my second thread about 1/4 of an inch away from the first thread. When I get to my side seams, I'm going to make sure that they stay pressed toward the back of the garment. But this will take me a minute to sew both of these basting threads. Okay, so I have my basting threads sewn in to the top of the body of the bubble. Now we've got some target points that we need to keep in mind. Obviously we have the back right opening, which is going to stay flat. We've got the first side seam. We have the front center that's marked with a little blue mark. We have the next side seam, and we have the left back side, which I basted the placket down, but I've also still got my pin there because, you know, there's just nothing worse than attaching your bodice and realizing that you left a placket sticking out. Okay, now on the bodice itself, we've got our positions, you know, well, not really marked on here, but we've got our right back position. We've got the side seam. What I need to do is I need to fold the front of the garment in half and make a little mark with my blue marking pen right at the center front of the bodice. Okay, so now I've got a little blue mark. Oops, sorry about that. I got a little blue mark at the center front of my bodice. Then we have our other side seam and the left back opening. Okay, now I'm going to turn the body of the bubble inside out, and starting from the front center, I'm going to start pinning my body to the bodice. Line up your two front center marks and just pin the body to the bodice. Okay, now I was just basting with blue threads, and since I'm going to be sewing on the white bodice now, I need to change my thread out to white, but I'll do that in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to line up my side seams on one side. And then before I line up my back right side, I'm going to go ahead and start gathering my threads. So just reach in and grab the two gathering threads and start pushing the fabric toward the center of the garment. Go right over the seam and keep pushing until the gathered fabric is the same width as the entredot on the bottom of the bodice. And then you'll probably have to move the gathers along the gathering thread to get them evenly spaced. So that takes a minute, but it's doable. It's worth the trouble. Okay, so I've got that pretty much evenly spaced. Move a couple more. Okay, now I can start pinning between the side seam and the front center. And I'll repeat this process all along the top of the body and the bottom of the bodice. So this will take me a minute to do. Okay, I've got this pinned all along the bottom of the bodice and the top of the body of the bubble. Okay, and now I have switched back to my white thread since I'm now sewing the white bodice to the bottom of the bubble. And sewing from the bodice side, I'm going to position my machine, lower my needle to where it's right next to the entre-deux ladder and not piercing it. I'm going to tack this down a couple of stitches. And then very carefully, I'm going to sew next to the entre-deux ladder all along the bottom of the bodice. Okay, this will take me a minute to do. Okay, so we've got the body of the bubble sewn to the bodice of the bubble, and just as a little check, I'm making sure that I do still have my placket oriented right or left over right in the back. So my buttons holes will go on the left side of the bodice and my buttons will go on the right side. Now I need to go to the ironing board and carefully iron down that seam to the inside so that I can come back and zigzag, but that'll take me a minute. Okay, now setting my machine back to a zigzag with the appropriate stitch length and stitch width for sewing entre-deux, I'm going to zigzag along this entre-deux line and tack this down. Making sure that my needle goes in the entre-deux hole on the right and just catches the fold of the fabric on the left. But this will take me a minute to do. Okay, so that is zigzagged on. But what I need to do next is, as usual, my lower gathering thread is showing. So using my seam ripper, I'm going to pull it out. And it should just come right out. Okay, and then I'm going to reach inside and grab the bobbin thread and pull it out also. And it should just come right out. There we go. Okay, now then, that's looking really sweet, isn't it? Okay, we're getting close to being finished. And in the next video, we are going to be marking the positions of the buttonholes on the back. On this particular garment, I'm going to be putting buttonholes and buttons at the crotch also. But if you want to put snaps at the crotch, that's perfectly fine. But, attaching the bodice to the body of the bubble was what we were doing today. Thank you.